Imagine the height of World War II. Hitler himself orders the construction of a fortress prison, a facility designed specifically to hold prisoners who had previously attempted escape, a place virtually impossible to break out from. Yet one man possessed the determination and willpower to change that fate. Not only did he plan his own escape, but he orchestrated the freedom of dozens of fellow prisoners. This is a story of planning and unmatched genius. Follow it to the very end. It was 1943. World War II was at its peak, the largest armed conflict in human history. Germany's Nazi forces, under Hitler's command, had invaded most of Europe. Across occupied territories, the Germans were capturing enormous numbers of military prisoners of war and building massive POW camps. But here's the problem. Many prisoners constantly attempted escape, and surprisingly, many succeeded. These weren't traditional prisons with concrete walls and iron bars. They were basic camps built from wooden barracks and huts, making them relatively easy to breach. Frustrated by these repeated escapes, the German High Command, acting on Hitler's direct orders, decided to build something different. They constructed specialized camps designed with one singular purpose: to make escape absolutely impossible. These facilities would house only the most dangerous prisoners, the ones who had already tried to escape before. Among these elite detention centers stood Stalag Luft III, located on Polish territory. This wasn't just any prison. It was an engineering marvel of containment. The barracks were elevated on concrete pillars, making it nearly impossible to dig tunnels underneath without detection. The ground consisted of loose sand, almost impossible to excavate without collapse. Microphones were buried throughout the earth, designed to catch any sound of digging. Above ground, double barbed wire fences surrounded the entire compound, with guard towers stationed at regular intervals. Armed guards maintained 24-hour surveillance. Escape seemed absolutely impossible. But then came Roger Bushell. Roger Bushell was a Royal Air Force pilot. During a bombing run over France, his aircraft was shot down. He parachuted safely, but was immediately captured by German forces. What makes Roger extraordinary is that every single time the Germans placed him in a camp, he escaped, and every single time they recaptured him, he became a legend among prisoners, a man seemingly unable to accept defeat. But one escape attempt changed everything. Roger and a Czech fellow prisoner escaped while being transported by train. Their plan was to reach Czechoslovakia and hide with a local family. That family sheltered them, protected them from German patrols. But their safety wouldn't last. A high-ranking German official was assassinated in the region, triggering massive Nazi crackdowns. When German soldiers began searching the area, Roger and his companion decided to leave, not wanting to endanger the family that had risked everything for them. But their escape was short-lived. They were quickly recaptured. Despite brutal interrogation, Roger and his friend never revealed the names of people who had helped them. But their neighbors, terrified of Nazi punishment, betrayed the family. The Germans executed the entire family. This tragedy shattered Roger psychologically. He emerged transformed, filled with unrelenting hatred for the Nazi regime and an iron resolve to strike back at their system. When the Germans transferred him to Stalag Luft III, Roger arrived at the most heavily fortified prison in occupied Europe, but this only strengthened his determination. The moment Roger arrived at Stalag Luft III, he began strategizing. He cultivated relationships with other prisoners, earning their trust. Within weeks, he had assembled a small group, about 5 or 6 men, whom he called the Security Council. Their mission: orchestrate the escape of as many prisoners as possible. But Roger's goal extended beyond simple freedom. He understood something profound. If hundreds of Allied soldiers suddenly escaped into German-controlled territory, the Nazi military would be forced to divert enormous resources to recapture them. Soldiers on the front lines would have to be pulled back for internal security operations. The German war effort would be disrupted. This wasn't just about escape. It was psychological warfare on a massive scale. The plan was brilliant. They would dig not 1 tunnel, but 3. Here's why this mattered. If guards discovered one tunnel, they would likely assume that was the only one. They would destroy it and lower their vigilance. Meanwhile, 2 other tunnels would continue construction in secret locations. But here's where the true difficulty emerged. The ground consisted of loose, sandy soil. Any tunnel would collapse without proper reinforcement. How could they construct supports without metal tools and hammers? Using hammers would create sound detected by underground microphones. The solution came from ingenious thinking. They obtained gramophone players, ancient record players that prisoners owned. Hidden inside was a metal spring. When extracted and uncoiled, this spring became rigid enough to cut through wood. Using this improvised tool, prisoners carefully dismantled their bunks and cut wooden planks into interlocking cube-shaped pieces. When assembled properly, these blocks would support each other without requiring nails or hammers. 3 tunnels were named Tom, David, and Harry. These weren't random names. They were cover. When prisoners discussed the operation, they would casually mention visiting Tom or checking on Harry. The Germans would never suspect they were discussing escape tunnels. This code system was essential because the Nazis employed spies among the prisoners. The Germans placed informants among the prisoner population. The Security Council needed protection against this threat. When new prisoners arrived, established inmates would befriend them and conduct seemingly casual conversations. But these were actually interrogations. An inmate would ask about the newcomer's hometown, its weather, specific landmarks, and neighborhoods. Only someone actually from that place could answer with convincing detail. If the answers didn't match reality, the prisoner was identified as a spy. The established inmates would then tell camp leadership, either remove this man immediately, or we cannot guarantee his safety. Remarkably, this method worked every single time. The Security Council also established an elaborate counter-surveillance network. They positioned trusted prisoners throughout the camp to watch the guards' movements. When a guard approached a work site, a system of coded body signals would communicate the danger down a chain of observers. A guard approaching would trigger someone scratching their head, which would signal the next person to touch their ear, and so on. These coded messages reached the working tunnel within seconds. Each observer didn't understand the signals they transmitted. They were unknowingly part of a chain. If captured and interrogated, they could reveal nothing. The entrances required genius-level concealment. The first tunnel, Harry, had its entrance under a heating stove in one of the barracks. The stove rested on a ceramic tile over a concrete supporting pillar. Prisoners lifted the stove and tile, revealing the pillar beneath. They dug directly into the concrete foundation. When finished for the day, they replaced everything exactly as it had been. No visible evidence. The second tunnel, David, began beneath a shower drainage system. An engineer among the prisoners crafted a replacement concrete slab identical to the original, fitting perfectly into the drain opening, completely indistinguishable. The third tunnel, Tom, also used a heating stove as camouflage, but with a modification. The engineer constructed a new concrete platform to support the stove, reinforced with wooden bracing. Even if guards examined it, they would see nothing suspicious. Prisoners could prop open the stove while it remained operational, allowing men to slip below. Over the following months, an engineering marvel emerged. The tunnels extended over 300 feet, deep enough to avoid detection equipment, yet stretching far enough to reach beyond the camp's perimeter. The construction team faced multiple challenges. The sand was prone to collapse, requiring constant reinforcement. They constructed a ventilation system by connecting tin cans to create air pipes, then built primitive bellows from old leather bags to pump air. Workers operated the fans by hand, exhausting, tedious work. Next came transportation. As tunnels grew longer, workers couldn't carry soil back to the entrance. The solution? A miniature railway. They constructed narrow-gauge tracks and built small wooden carts. Workers loaded soil into carts, which rolled along the tracks to the entrance, where soil was carefully disposed of in the camp's vegetable gardens. Then came lighting. Without illumination, work would be impossible in the depths of a 300-foot tunnel. Prisoners secretly extracted electrical wiring from work being conducted on camp facilities. They stole light bulbs from various locations and connected them to the camp's main electrical system, creating impressive lighting that extended the entire tunnel length. The coordination was extraordinary. An architect managed structural engineering. An electrician handled power systems. Carpenters built the railway. A forger would later create identity documents. Dozens more provided labor. Every man understood his role and kept quiet about details. For months, work proceeded without major incident. But in one fateful moment, everything nearly collapsed. A guard conducting routine inspection dropped his stick directly onto the concrete slab covering Tom's entrance. The impact cracked the concrete, revealing suspicious damage. The guard investigated, discovered the opening, and immediately alerted commanders. The German response was swift. They destroyed the Tom tunnel completely with explosives. But here's where Rogers' decision to dig 3 tunnels proved genius. When Germans examined Tom's construction, the engineering, time investment, organization, they assumed this represented the prisoners' single major effort. They actually relaxed their surveillance, believing the primary threat was eliminated. They never imagined the prisoners had the resources to build 2 more tunnels of equal complexity. A second problem emerged. Germans decided to expand the camp in the direction where David Tunnel's exit was located. They began clearing trees, destroying the forest cover prisoners had counted on. The Security Council adapted quickly. They abandoned David but made a crucial decision: use David as a dumping ground for soil from Harry. This accelerated Harry's construction by eliminating the need to disperse soil throughout the camp. All efforts now focused on Harry. By March 1944, after more than a year of continuous labor, Harry was finally complete. The tunnel stretched over 300 feet, deep enough to avoid detection, long enough to reach beyond the perimeter. But before escape could begin, prisoners needed forged identification papers. The Security Council included skilled forgers who spent months creating false documents with official stamps and signatures. But one major obstacle remained: photographs. Legitimate documents required ID photos, held by camp administration. Only guards could access them. The solution was audacious. They would blackmail the guards. Some prisoners were skilled at stealing small items. They would filch a guard's identification card. Another prisoner would then approach that guard with information about his lost documents. That's serious. The commandant will probably send you to the front lines for carelessness, unless you cooperate with us. The guard, faced with combat reassignment, would negotiate. What do you want? The prisoners replied. Just a few photographs and some stamps. Nothing that will help us escape. Reasoning that photographs couldn't enable escape from maximum security prison, guards complied. Prisoners obtained everything needed to complete their false identities. March 24th, 1944. The Security Council made their final decision. Tonight was the night. All designated escapees would converge on Barrack 104, Harry's entrance. Security Council members would check off each man's name. The operation would proceed in waves. Around 10 p.m., the first prisoners began crawling through the tunnel. The passage was barely wide enough for one man. Visibility was almost non-existent despite lighting. Every 100 feet, the tunnel narrowed further. Progress was agonizingly slow. Then problems emerged. An electrical failure plunged sections into complete darkness. A tunnel section collapsed, requiring emergency repairs consuming precious hours. The ventilation system struggled with so many men in confined space. What should have been streamlined became a desperate struggle against time and engineering failures. But prisoners persevered. Hour after hour, one man crawled through after another, dragging themselves forward through sand, carrying only forged documents and hope. At 5 a.m., sunlight began appearing, but the operation was nowhere near completion. Men were still queuing. The Security Council had miscalculated time required. And worse, the tunnel's exit would place them in open ground, only about 150 feet from guard towers. Not in the forest, not hidden, completely exposed. But there was no choice to delay. By 5 a.m., 76 prisoners had successfully exited and scattered into darkness, moving toward various hiding spots. 3 additional prisoners emerged after sunrise, but guards spotted them immediately. They surrendered and were recaptured. The remaining prisoners still inside faced a choice: merge and risk being shot, or retreat and face execution for attempting escape. Most retreated, but 76 men had made it out, extraordinary under impossible circumstances. 76 men escaped, an incredible achievement, but Germans moved swiftly. Within 72 hours, most were recaptured. Many were caught within kilometers of the camp. Some hid in forest, others attempted train travel using false documents. Only a handful evaded capture completely and returned to their home countries. Roger Bushell himself attempted to flee using false documents. He tried boarding a train, but German soldiers detected him during routine document checks. He was arrested. In standard warfare, captured soldiers were protected by international law, but these prisoners had escaped from the most secure facility Hitler had personally ordered built. Furious, Hitler ordered the execution of every prisoner in Stalag Luft III. His advisors, fearing international backlash, persuaded him to change his decision. Instead, 50 of the recaptured prisoners, those believed to have led the escape, would be executed. Among them was Roger Bushell. He was executed on Hitler's direct orders. Although the escape ended in tragedy, it achieved its objective. The escape of 76 prisoners forced the Germans to divert thousands of soldiers and valuable resources away from the front lines to search for and recapture them, disrupting military operations. When Roger Bushell faced execution, he knew he had accomplished his mission. He had struck a blow against the Nazi regime through one of the most daring escape attempts in history. We've reached the end of this story. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like on this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.